Now, without further ado, let's welcome Laurel Schulert, Senior Director of Learning Experience with SAP. Laurel, let's get this webinar started. Share your screen, please.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen. I will go ahead and get this show running. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. As Kristen said, my name is Laurel Schulert. I am the Senior Director of Learning Experience at SAP Concur. I lead a team of instructional designers. I imagine there's many instructional designers and potentially some L&D leaders and aspiring leaders out there with us today. Like Kristen mentioned, this is going to be an interactive workshop. So this is not your typical talking head webinar. If you're really hoping to just multitask and check some emails and listen to some lady talk in the background, this is really not that. We're going to be doing a lot of reflection. We're going to be doing some journaling. And I'm really going to ask you to think about how you can apply this message in your setting today, because I imagine that's really what you came here for, not an hour-long email multitasking sync. You're really looking for how can I improve my operations? You're really looking for how can I make the most of any leadership opportunities that I'm presented with? And that's what I aim to give you here today. I really invite all of you to connect with me. This QR code should bring you to my LinkedIn. If you have any comments, questions, feedback, if you want to continue the conversation afterwards, I invite you to do so. And if you're really interested in hearing more from me, I do encourage you to check out a publication that I have available through ATD, the Association for Talent Development, and that's A-List L&D Team Assemble, which you see here. Without further ado, let's jump in. So I think I know why this session appealed to you. Being a learning leader is really no small feat. New leaders struggle with uncertainty and indecision as they really venture into uncharted territory, and they're asked to make high stakes decisions on pretty much a daily basis. Finding the resources and guidance tailored to the unique needs of an L&D leader can be a really time-consuming challenge because in my experience, I found that most leadership development content isn't written specifically for us as learning leaders. And furthermore, learning leaders often lack that internal network of peers, especially if you lead the only L&D team in your organization. So, with all of these factors compounding, developing yourself as a learning leader, especially when you're new in the role, probably falls to the bottom of your very long to-do list. You have a lot of other more pressing matters every single day. Maybe you're struggling with day-to-day responsibilities of hiring, competing for your organization's resources. Maybe you're struggling with your feelings of inadequacy. If you're struggling with what you thought was going to be your dream job once you get there, and it's a little more difficult and different than you imagined. All of this because I've been there, and that's what my journey was like when I was early in my L&D leadership. And so I created this session for you to address all of these factors because, in my experience, I noticed an absence of professional development content aimed specifically at learning leaders. So it's my goal to really work with you to fill that gap. And it's my hope that this session empowers you to thrive in an L&D leadership role, whether you currently hold that role or you aspire to hold it someday. Like I said, this is going to be an interactive workshop. In the next hour, we'll do several activities where you will learn how to position yourself as the ideal candidate for your dream leadership job. We'll help you start building a personalized action plan for that role, whether you currently hold it or you're dreaming of it someday. And we'll explore how to recruit, select, and retain your top L&D talent. So you'll have the opportunity to do some journaling and personal reflection. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out through that Q&A option here in Zoom, or feel free to connect with me after the fact. Kristen, this is a good call out for that handout. There is a fillable PDF handout that accompanies this. If you're listening to the recording later on, it should be attached to the recording communications. But if we could go ahead and drop that here in the chat at this point, this would be a great time for that.
Okay, I'm going to grab that.
Just keep an eye on the chat so we can see when that is here. All right. There is a link now in the chat to a fillable PDF. If anyone has any difficulty accessing that, just let us know. And again, feel free to take notes on your own. The handout isn't required. It's just helpful. It has the prompts. So that first step for us today is to really envision who your dream L&D team is. Kristen, I just want to call out there may be an access issue there with the PDF. And again, folks, if the PDF doesn't make it through, I do encourage you to just do the same activities on some scrap paper that you have for yourself. We can make it work either way.
I see that and I am on it, trying to add it to my Google Drive and give everybody access.
No problem. All right. So while we're waiting on that, let's just tee up the activity so you can all start thinking about what you would like to put in that journal, whether it's the PDF or your own paper here. So the first step is to really envision what your dream team looks like. A really common coaching technique for athletes is to visualize their dream performance. So for example, hitting a home run in baseball. And workplace performance doesn't have to be any different. When you can think about what a home run looks like for you in your setting, when you can feel the weight of the bat in your hands, you can hear the crowd roaring, you're so much more likely to actually achieve that goal someday. And so, our first activity today is going to be an envisioning exercise. Think about what that home run looks like for you in your setting. And so, the question I'd like to ask you is a question that the leader who first promoted me to be a manager once asked me and my team. It's a really powerful question. It's one that I've come back to many times in my career, and I actually ask my team every single year as part of our team goal setting process. And that question is, what do you want to be known for? And so we're going to give you a minute here, just 1 minute, to write the first thing that comes to mind, because the first thing you think of is going to be really powerful. When people think about you and your work, what do you want to be known for? So we're going to pause here for a quick minute. If the PDF hasn't made its way through the chat, no worries. Oh, and it looks like we do have a link. So let's try that out. And again, if there's any access issues, we can always do the journals on our own on scrap paper as well. I'll be quiet here for a minute just to give you that space to answer this question. When people think about you and your work, what do you want to be known for?
And everyone is going to need to download their own copy and then edit that, please. Otherwise, you are going to be writing over other people's stuff. If anyone has just arrived, we are clicking on the link, downloading a copy of the document, and then adding in your response to the question that is on your screen.
All right. I'd love to hear from you. If we have any brave souls who wouldn't mind sharing, what do you want to be known for? Please enter your thoughts in the chat and let us know. When people think about you and your work, what do you want them thinking about you? What do you want to be known for? Oh, come on. I know those of us who work in L&D are a very friendly social group. I'd love to hear from a few brave souls if you wouldn't mind entering your thoughts in the chat. All right, Lisa, thank you. Quality and reliability. Love that. My team actually just received feedback this week that we are known as a very reliable crew. We follow through on commitments, and that just made me so happy. And so I love that you share that. Love to hear from a few others. Again, when people think about you and your work, what do you want to be known for? Connection, communication, absolutely. That's such a critical role that we play in that L&D setting, and just really bringing people together and really aligning to that central message that our organizations express. All right, love that. Thank you all. All right, so this journal topic we will come back to and think about a few more times throughout the session today. And so if you didn't get a chance to use Kristen's link there in the chat and download it, please do go ahead and do so. We'll do a few more journaling exercises over the course of the hour, and we'll come back and think about this vision a few more times. So I do definitely recommend grabbing that journal if you have not yet already done so. And it looks like the link is now fresh in the chat again for anyone who doesn't have that yet. All right, let's move on and let's think about our next topic. So once you have that vision for yourself really clear in your mind, you want to think about your personal brand or what others think of you. Essentially, Does your vision for yourself align with what others think about you? And when you're pursuing a leadership role in your current organization, or maybe as an external candidate somewhere else, you obtaining that role is reliant on others being able to see you in the role. So, this is where your personal brand comes in, and that means taking control of your reputation. It's how you stand out from the crowd, and a really strong personal brand opens you up for professional opportunities. The key to a strong brand is that it has to be supported by your network. It's reliant on more than how you see yourself, and it relies on how others see you. So there's a few aspects that make up your personal brand, and those would be your core values, your personality traits, your skills, your strengths, and your vision for yourself. And so we're actually going to pause here and do one more quick journaling exercise. I'll give you another minute here. Again, that link is really fresh in the chat. And I'd like you to think about what makes up your personal brand. So, this is the next box in the handout. When you think about your core values, your personality, your skills and strengths, and your vision for yourself, what makes up your personal brand? I'll pause here for another quick minute of journaling. If anyone's just joined us, we're wrapping up our second journal prompt here. What makes up your personal brand? Or if you want to go a step further, what leadership traits make up your personal brand? So now we're going to go really beyond just brainstorming these, and I'm going to ask you to be a little bit braver again. And I want you to practice saying these things out loud, because it's not enough to just think about it to yourself. When you go through the interview process for a leadership role, you have to be able to express to others what makes you a strong leader. And so we're going to do an exercise here, maybe a bit awkward, but I guarantee this works. If you practice saying these things here now, you'll be much more comfortable practicing them in front of a real live audience someday with confidence and competence to explain what makes you a strong leader. So I'm going to be quiet for a few seconds, and I'd like you, wherever you are in the world, if you're comfortable either saying these things out loud, or if you're like, oh no, I'm in an open floor plan, I can't say this out loud right here, right now with my coworkers around me, maybe just mouse the word silently, but get in the practice of saying these things where you can. And I'd like to ask you, what makes you a strong leader? And you've already done the brainstorming for this. At this point, you have a vision for yourself. You've identified some traits of your personal brand. So I'm going to ask you, what makes you a strong leader? Practice answering that question if you can. All right. Hopefully, this was a safe space because none of us here on the webinar could actually hear you. But if we do have any brave souls out there, I'd love to see a few thoughts come through the chat. Maybe Lisa, James, Randall, anybody who's already spoken up, if you can be brave and speak up again. I'd love to hear a few thoughts come through the chat. What makes you a strong leader? Are there aspects of your brand, what you want to be known for, that make you a strong leader? Is anybody comfortable sharing at this point? Transparency. Love that. Uh, Camille says, I'm willing to admit when I make mistakes and acknowledge the impacts of those mistakes. Camille, that humility, that's so critical. I think that pairs really nicely with Kristen's comment about transparency, honestly. One of the biggest lessons that I had to learn when I became a leader was it's okay that I don't have all the answers, because in life, we're never going to have all the answers. None of us are perfect, and we all still make mistakes. And so, Camille, I love that you are just so honest about you're willing to admit when you make those mistakes. Randall says being proactive with defining problems and finding solutions. Love that. I think we've all heard the advice before. Don't just speak the problem, really look to find a solution. That's what we look to our leaders to do. We look for them to find the solutions. So love that. Thank you to the two of you for sharing. Let's move on here and let's explore a little bit more about leadership here. So now that you've identified your values, excuse me, your values, your traits, other important aspects of your personal brand, think about how these impact how you show up at work. It's not uncommon for leaders to feel imposter syndrome, especially when you're just brand new in the role, or if you're only even considering applying for your first leadership role. So it's really critical to know the value you bring so you have the confidence to pursue opportunities when you see them, or if you can make them for yourself, and the fortitude to actually succeed once you're there in the role. So many years ago, I actually began my career as a high school teacher. And at the time, I wasn't very much older than the students, and standing up in front of the classroom was sometimes terrifying. And so a teacher at that point in time gave me advice that I'll never forget. And it's advice that I hearken back to really to this day, 20 years later. And she said, Laurel, you need to develop your teacher persona. You need to radiate confidence, assume that position of authority, and really establish that you're the leader in that setting. And now, teaching high school is uniquely challenging in ways that many corporate work environments are not. But that whole lesson of adopting a persona is something that I've come back to time and time again in really stressful situations throughout my career. And so, when I was first considering applying for a leadership role after being an instructional designer for several years, I knew that I needed to develop a leadership persona so that others would really see me as capable and credible and ready for that next opportunity. And so, I did this in several different ways. I stepped up to lead larger projects at work. I took on more responsibility before I was asked to. I made my vision known because I had that vision for myself of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to be known for. And I wasn't shy about sharing that fact that I aspired to hold a leadership role in this organization someday. And then outside of work, I volunteered on the board of directors for a local nonprofit. In my experience, that was actually my local ATD, Association for Talent Development chapter. And by serving on that volunteer board of directors, I actually gained leadership experience that I wasn't getting yet at work. So that when I did interview at work and people said, what leadership experience do you have? I now had experience that I could speak to, talking about things like managing volunteers and managing other employees, serving a mission and vision, defining a mission and vision, managing a budget, things like that. And I was able to speak about those experiences because I had them as a volunteer outside of work where I wasn't yet getting that experience at work. And so for me, taking these actions based on my personality, my values, my skills, my strengths, it really led me to embody that leadership persona that I hoped I would be someday. And so, my call to action for all of you is that the workplace needs good leaders. We all know that by this point in our careers. So, if you have that desire to be a good leader, really find that courage and that confidence within yourself to rise up and take a very intentional action and get to work. And having this clear understanding of your personal brand, and then really intentionally taking action to position yourself as a leader and as that positive force goes a really long way to helping you obtain that role and then succeeding once you're there. All right. So once you're there, once you have that leadership role, what do? You'll want to take a few actions to really understand your current work environment and start plotting that path ahead for both you and for your team. So, a really helpful practice that my team does year over year is conducting a SWOT analysis. And that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And these discussions typically involve whiteboarding ideas in a 4-square grid. You can do 4 squares like this, 4 columns, 4 rows, whatever works. My team's all virtual, so we use virtual tools for this. You can do it in person, virtually, whatever works for you in your setting. And you might choose to do this either by yourself as the leader. You might choose to include your team. You might choose to include other peers across your org whose feedback is really valuable to you in this discovery process. And although this might feel like a very simple exercise, I found this to be really profound and it has a very valuable impact for my team. And so we actually come back and do this year over year. And we found that over time, some ideas remain true, where some ideas dissolve over time, and sometimes new things pop up. And how we typically do this, again, I mentioned we do this virtually. My team is permanently remote. So we do this virtually. And we build the whiteboard about a week in advance before we have a meeting to talk about it. So folks have a whole week to really go in, see each other's posts and ideas. And we use this very scientific process of voting by reaction emoji. So the ideas and the sticky notes that get the most reactions and kind of sub comments and emojis and GIFs tied to them are clearly the hot topics that we'll spend time talking about when we actually come together and meet and talk about these. And after we have this conversation, this really becomes the springboard for us setting both individual and team goals because we think about what are the strengths we want to take advantage of? What are weaknesses that we want to address? Opportunities that we want to seize? Threats that we want to eliminate or influence? And so, in earlier versions of this presentation, when I just talked about the SWOT, I was told, Laurel, you really didn't do the SWOT justice. And so, again, here's where the workshop element comes in. Today, we're really going to do the SWOT justice. And so, I'm going to give you 5 minutes here. Again, this is another opportunity to use that PDF handout. Kristen, if you wouldn't mind dropping that in the chat one more time in case anyone has just joined us. But I'm going to give you 5 minutes here to really start plotting out your SWOT. I'm going to ask you to fill in all 4 quadrants. And I will not be asking you to share this. This is just really for you and for your own reflection. So feel free to be as candid as you want to be on your own PDF. No one's going to see it. Again, if you are accessing the handout through Kristen's Google Drive, please make sure to download your own version and don't type directly into her Google Drive. But this is really just for you to start thinking about your team, whether you are currently the leader or whether you aspire to be the leader. What is the current state of your team, and what are some things you'd like to remedy or address? And so I'll give you 5 minutes here to really dig in and do your SWOT analysis justice. All right, let's start wrapping up our thoughts on the SWOT here. Well, thank you all. And I really hope this reflection was valuable in assessing that current state of your team. And remember, when you complete this exercise again in the future, feel free to involve anyone whose perspective is valuable to you. That could include your team members themselves, your leadership, any peers across the business. And this conversation, this reflection will really prepare you for the next steps that I recommend all leaders take, which is working with your team to write mission and vision statements. And now these two concepts are often confused with one another to the point they're sometimes used interchangeably, but they actually mean two different things and serve two different purposes. So your mission defines your organization's objectives and how it plans to reach them. Your vision is more future focused and it describes your aspirations. And so, even if your company as a whole or your larger department already have missions and vision statements in place, there's clear value in really taking the time to define the mission and vision for your unique small team that you're part of to really discover what is your unique identity within those larger organizations. And defining your team's mission and vision is a very impactful exercise that really aligns your group into a cohesive unit with a shared mindset. We don't have time today to write mission and vision statements, but I did provide these two definitions for you on your handout. They're right at the top of page 2. So if you want to come back and do more discovery around this later on or lead your team in this exercise, you have those definitions on the handout that you can take with you. And shortly after I moved into my first leadership role, leading a team, I led my team in exactly this exercise, writing our mission and vision. And this has been a really powerful exercise for us to come together as a unit. And I did it with the team. So it wasn't just me as the boss laying down my orders from on high of who I wanted us to be. This was something that we really did collectively as a team so that every individual was empowered and had that voice in defining who we were as a unit. And this has been really impactful for us to have in place as we go about doing our daily work. So we come back and look at these statements annually. It's part of our annual cycle of asking ourselves, what do we want to be known for? Doing that SWOT analysis, setting any related goals, and making sure that we're still on track and that the mission and vision reflect our best work and our vision for ourselves. And while these are definitely our North Star that guide us throughout the year, they're not carved in stone. They really can and do and have to evolve over time, just like the business is constantly evolving around us. However, having all of these concepts in place, the SWOT analysis, that vision for the current state, the mission and vision statements, has really led my team to work in harmony. It's helped us with everything from making sure that we are taking on the right projects. It's really helped us define our scope and our strengths to others around us who don't always understand what L&D it can do and should be doing. It's really helped me as a leader, making sure that I'm hiring the right individuals to join the team. We'll talk a bit more about hiring in a minute here. And it's really helped us really frame up and have those conversations around how we can define the business as the L&D experts that we are. Excuse me. So that leads us to hiring. Hiring is one of the most critical decisions that any leader can make. And L&D leaders have really unique factors to consider when hiring new members for their teams. So once you have that insight that your SWOT analysis provided, as well as your mission and vision statements, you're prepared to identify what roles to fill and then also find the right individuals to fill those roles. So whenever you have vacancies on your team, it's really important to figure out what mix of skills and responsibilities are needed to help your team achieve its goals. I always recommend beginning with reflecting on why the position is open in the first place. You can draw a lot of insight from just thinking about that very simple fact. Why is this role open on my team? Is your team growing to meet new demands? Did somebody leave for a specific reason? Can you address that reason and prevent someone else from leaving for the same reason? And so every new vacancy is really an opportunity for you to think about, is your team appropriately staffed with the right job descriptions, the right people, the right mix of skill sets that will help bring your vision into reality or not? And so on this slide, I've listed several roles that often exist in L&D teams, as well as roles that partner really closely with L&D teams. Depending on your team setting, your organization's needs, etc., you might want to hire for these L&D specific roles, or you might want to actually hire those that fall outside the traditional skill set. I'm going to ask you to pause here for our next journal activity. So that first box on page 2 of the handout, I'd like you to think about what gaps currently exist on your team and what new skills would you like to introduce. We'll pause here for you to think about this for a minute. Okay, and I would love to hear in the chat. Is there anything on this list that resonated with you? Any skills or roles you see listed here that you would like to add to your team, or anything else maybe outside of this list that you thought about? If anybody wouldn't mind sharing through the chat, I love to crowdsource ideas at this point. What are some skills or roles you would love to see added to your L&D team that aren't currently represented in your team or in your L&D organization? Looks like it's a little quiet coming through the chat right now. When I've delivered this in the past, I've typically heard lots of calls for project managers. It's so interesting. As instructional designers, we are often asked to wear that project management hat, yet so few of us are actually trained in project management. So that's usually a hot topic. Data analyst, especially as we move into the AI era, our organizations are collecting so much data from so many different places. Data analyst is definitely a popular choice. Lisa in the chat says she would love an LMS admin. Yes, that is definitely a role that exists currently on my team, largely driven by the fact that my first role in L&D was an instructional design LMS admin hybrid. I was the person who designed all the training and uploaded it to the LMS and helped 10,000 people reset their passwords on a regular basis. And now it's a tall order. So really carving out space for someone to focus on the technical LMS administration so that your designers can focus on designing and developing, facilitating. That's a really important step towards, I think, a more mature L&D organization. So Lisa, thank you for sharing that. All right, a few final notes on hiring here. Let's move on. A leader who I greatly respect once told me, Laurel, hiring poorly is one of the worst mistakes you can make as a manager. And those words have really just stuck with me over time, and they're top of mind every time I hire. So I have some advice before you even post a job opening. Think about your team's current state. If you've done your SWOT analysis, you're prepared with that. But think about your team's current state and what mix of skills and responsibilities will really help your team work towards those missions and visions that you've designed for yourself. And once you've identified gaps, this new opportunity gives you an opportunity to really work to bring a new talent to close those gaps. So my first piece of advice here may sound very obvious, but there's some magic to this. Determine the title and job description and align with your recruiter. And so once you determine that role you're hiring for, pay really close attention to the title and job description that you post. This may sound very obvious, but I've heard some things kind of go awry in the past. I once knew a manager who was hiring for what is basically an instructional design type role, but they were using the title content developer. And their employer happened to be a software company. And I heard anecdotally that when they were trying to hire people using this title of content developer at the software company, a lot of people who were applying weren't L&D professionals. It was software developers because they just saw the word developer in the title and sent their application in. And so really making sure that you're using industry standard titles and very carefully written job descriptions is a really great place to start. I always recommend writing the job description yourself if you're the leader, because people who work in L&D, as I'm sure a lot of us on this call can relate to, have really high attention to detail. We tend to read every single word in that job description and really look for clues of what is this company going to be like? What is this team or this manager going to be like? And when you take the time to really carefully write the job description yourself and don't just use something generic you found online or something generic that HR gave you that maybe doesn't really represent the role, you're going to create a much stronger first impression for anyone who's reading that application and applying for it. I also really recommend that you align very closely with your recruiter. This was a big lesson learned for me when I first became a hiring manager. I've worked with a number of recruiters over the years to hire people onto my team. And I always begin with asking the recruiter, what's your experience hiring for L&D or instructional design? A lot of them have not hired specifically for our industry before. They're used to hiring roles that happen much more commonly across the large organizations that we work for. And so when you think about the candidate's experience, that recruiter is their first point of contact for questions, for explaining the role, for doing that phone screen. Recruiters often select which candidates hiring managers even get visibility into. So it's critically important that you are lockstep aligned with your recruiter, that they understand your mission, your vision, what skills and strengths you're looking for, gaps in your team, how to best close those gaps. Because if the recruiter is explaining things to the candidate on your behalf or selecting candidates on your behalf, you really want to make sure that they understand your vision that you're looking for. I'm going to pause here. I see a little chatter in the chat about this whole notion of a tech producer. Love that. You might notice we have one here today. So I want to give a shout out to Kristen. It really helps me as a facilitator just worry about what I'm doing when I know there's someone on the back end watching the chat, monitoring the links, things like that. And so take it as sort of a lesson learned from us. We have this set up, this way by design. And so I definitely advocate for having a Zoom producer. If you have anyone in your organization who is doing virtual training, having a second set of hands be that backup tech producer really takes so much stress off of the presenter. So love that. I love that that was someone's takeaway from that previous slide around the gaps in your organization. All right, let's keep thinking about how to build and retain that top L&D talent. So as you're going through the interview process, interviewing people to join your team, really show your passion. By this point, again, you've theoretically done your SWOT analysis, you have your mission and vision in place, you know where you're going. Share this, be that transparent leader we discussed a while back with someone else's response in the chat here. Share your passion, share your mission and vision with people that you speak to. This will really help them make that informed decision. Is this a team that I want to join? Is this a team that I want to be part of? And it'll really help you suss out, do they have the same energy and the same passion that you have? Next piece of advice here, if you are hiring an instructional designer, I highly recommend requiring portfolios for instructional designers. And if you do look for portfolios as part of your selection process, really make it obvious to candidates, call it out specifically in your job description. This is one of the screening tools that you'll be used, make it a required piece of the application. And I strongly recommend portfolios because in my experience, when I've hired instructional designers, I tend to get hundreds of applications in the first couple of days. So where do you even begin to make cuts? And portfolios for me have really been that make or break point for me selecting which candidates move not only to interviews, period, but through the interview process. I look for candidates whose work is interesting, whose work is visually engaging. I look for candidates whose work clearly shows application of adult learning theories, reflection on their craft, things like that. And having that sense of what candidates are capable of has really helped me make educated decisions throughout the hiring process about who we want to invite to bring onto the team. If you are going to use portfolios as part of your selection process, I really recommend not asking candidates to do additional homework throughout the interview process. I think we've all been in the place as candidates ourselves where we've been asked to do random little homework or, build a sample this, build a sample that. And if they already have portfolios, trust that they have put blood, sweat, and tears in these portfolio pieces. Are there already evidence of their best work? And don't ask them to do additional homework along the way. It kind of feels unnecessary at that point, in my opinion. My next piece of advice as you're going through that hiring process, I strongly recommend working to include members of your team in the interview process. And I see this as a win-win-win. It's a win for everyone. You're sourcing more valuable perspectives to continue to consider. Your current team members really appreciate having a voice in who's being asked to come work alongside them. And then candidates get that visibility and that perspective into what the whole team looks like. And so this is a really, like I said, win-win-win around. It's valuable for everyone to be part of that process. Once you have that dream team built, you really want to hold on to them because we all know that turnover comes at a really high cost, both in terms of morale and productivity. So once that team is in place, you really want to work on establishing role clarity, both within your team and with any cross-functional partners who you collaborate with on a regular basis. And that really serves to establish happiness, satisfaction, and overall clarity for everyone all together. Especially, this is something to be mindful of whenever there's turnover or any sort of reduction in force happening. As folks exit the team, exit the business, you really want to make sure that you are maintaining role clarity for everyone who is left behind, that they're not experiencing scope creep or expansion of their roles and responsibilities just because one of their neighbors is no longer here. And so building that role clarity is really mission critical for everyone's just overall satisfaction and productivity. And my last piece of advice here for retaining your top talent is wherever possible, try to align your employees' assignments and projects with their personal and professional goals. Quite frankly, everyone joined your team for a reason. They had some sort of personal accomplishment they wanted to see, whether it's gaining new skills, having a new experience, really building on previous successes somewhere else. And so, anywhere that you can align the work that they're doing on your team with their personal and professional goals, again, we're going to see higher productivity, higher morale, higher retention. This is another win-win all the way around. Also, wherever possible, think about stretch assignments that may be something new and engaging for your team to consider. And so, a stretch assignment is kind of like what it sounds like. It could be something that is a bit of a new skill, a new responsibility, but something that your team members are willing to take on to really help them explore new parts of the business, new responsibilities, and really contribute in a different way over the course of their career. You really want to make sure that once you recruit that top talent, that you're holding on to them. Because as we all know, turnover comes at such a high cost in terms of both morale and productivity. So I'd like to pause here for one more final question I want to ask of all of you. If you could please drop me some feedback in the chat, which of these best practices resonated with you, or are there any of these that you would like a little more clarification on? Are there any of these that really resonated with you? Just kind of an aha moment, a light bulb, or I'm open to any feedback as well. Any of these you'd like a little more advice on? Portfolios always seem to be a hot topic. I'll speak about that one a little bit more. Portfolios are always such a hot topic, both for designers and for hiring managers alike. And so I've had a lot of questions from designers over the years. Laurel, how do I build a portfolio if all of my pieces are proprietary? I can't necessarily take things that I built at my previous employer and go shop them around at future employers. And that's true. You really want to make sure that you are making intelligent decisions when it comes to your portfolio pieces and that you're not sharing any confidential or proprietary information from one employer to the next. And so, honestly, a really good remedy for that is making up pieces that are unique to your portfolio, not entirely using samples that were built by previous employers. Excuse me. And so, if there is a particular authoring tool or design software that you really like and you really excel in, if there's a particular learning theory that you really enjoy making use of, I honestly do recommend taking the time and putting in the effort to make a portfolio piece that is unique to your portfolio that wasn't used by a previous employer. It's really a chance where you can show ultimate creativity, you have ultimate design control, and you're not running the risk of jeopardizing any sensitive information. I've also had questions from other hiring managers in the past around how do I know if candidates really actually built these portfolio pieces? I think that's something that you can really suss out during the interview process. When I have been interviewing in the past, I definitely use my portfolio as sort of conversation fodder when I go to interviews. And I do the same thing as a hiring manager. I ask candidates about their portfolios. I'll say, why did you choose this design tool? Or what was the impact of this thing that you built if you had the chance to use it in real life? Or tell me about a model, a design model, or an adult learning theory that really guided your decisions here. And so by using these portfolio pieces as conversation fodder through the interview process, you get a lot more insight into candidates' thoughts and processes and work patterns. And I think it really helps suss out if it's something they truly built or not. Thank you for the comments in the chat. We have a comment here about what resonated aligning with personal and professional goals. Yeah, um, again, like we all want to be fulfilled by the work that we're doing. And so I have really found that being able to harness my team's talents, my strengths, their passions, their interests, wherever possible, aligning their work and their projects with things that personally and professionally interest them. It's just had such a tremendous impact all the way around. James, thank you also for the comment on the subject of role clarity. It's something that we're all experiencing with. I think these days at L&D, unfortunately, a lot of us are being asked to do more with less. whether that means less time, less people, less budget, less can mean any number of things. There's a lot of shifting sands these days. As we're doing more with less, there's a lot of new technologies coming our way. I'd be remiss if I don't mention AI. This is probably the first time in a year you've gone 45 minutes and haven't heard the words AI spoken. And so having that role clarity of what is in scope for your L&D team is really mission critical. We are oftentimes the only people in the whole business who do the type of work that we do. And quite frankly, not everyone around us understands our job description. Not everyone understands the mission, the vision that we have, the impact that we can have. And a lot of people, when they hear I manage a team of instructional designers, they immediately start thinking about graphic design and, oh, can you just make this look pretty for me? And my team can make things look pretty, but that's not really our area of expertise. Our area of expertise is adult learning, educational best practices. So again, having that role clarity is really mission critical for teeing up my team for success, both for in terms of how we view our own success and in terms of how others view our success. All right. Well, really, with that, I'd like to open it up for any further Q&A. And again, I really invite all of you to connect with me and just continue that conversation. I'd love to hear from you, questions, comments, feedback. This has been a topic that I've been really interested in exploring as I go through my leadership journey. Like I said at the start of the call, when I was a new leader, I looked for content like this. I really looked for that guidance on, there's materials out there on how to work in L&D. There's no shortage of materials out there on how to be a leader in a business or a corporate setting, but that intersection of how to lead the learning function didn't really exist. And so it's been my mission to create all of that for you. I'd love to hear more from you and really just hear what resonated. And so I want to open it up for any more Q&A that's coming through the chat, or if not, for any final words from Kristen and from our hosts.
These wonderful people have been quite quiet today. I'm not used to that.
We have a question from Randall. What are the most compelling types of projects to transition from senior L&D individual contributor to leader? Randall, I would say anywhere that you can really clearly demonstrate the impact of your work in terms of actual attainment of business results, whatever that looks like in your setting. Um, Anywhere where you have been the leader of a project team. It's so interesting. I've seen a lot of conversation in various LinkedIn posts recently around what word should you use in interviews more, I or we. And I've seen posts advocating for you should say I, and here's why. You should say we, and here's why. And I wish I could remember the name of someone who said this, but I saw someone summarize it as, I like emphasizing that I led a project team and we accomplished this. And I wish I could give credit to the person who said that. And I apologize, the name is tip of my tongue here. But Randall, I would say anywhere that you can show that you led a project team to success, that's really what the organization is looking for in aspiring leaders. What was that make or break point that you were able to elevate that team to success? And what is the ultimate impact that you had in helping your organization achieve the goal at hand?
And I don't think anybody has any more questions for you, Laurel. Looks like we can wrap it up.
Well, thank you all so very much.
And thank you, Laurel, for being here today. We appreciate you and we appreciate our attendees. And you will receive a copy of this recording in about probably on Monday. Give our people behind the scenes a couple of days to be able to get all the information together and make sure it looks all nice, that whole design aspect part of it. But thank you so much, Laurel, and to attendees, and we will see you at another You'll Be Learning hosted webinar next week. Thanks so much and have a great day.